Hello and welcome to Fireside Chat number 59. For those of you who are new to this, I am Ash, joined by Sandro and José. Sandro and I are the co-founders of Codurance, and José is managing director for Codurance Spain. The way it works is that we've used to have a lot of these conversations offline after work over a few drinks, and at one day decided that why don't we record those, and people may be interested. Turns out people are interested, and we stream this live. So it'd be lovely if you can join us, primarily on YouTube, and you can ask questions, and we will incorporate those into our conversation. And of course, it's always on our YouTube channel as well. And subscribe. And if you're able to tell you when we are speaking next, we normally do that every Tuesday evening at the same time. So the topic for today's Fireside Chat is non-technical skills for tech careers. And part of this is a conversation that I had with one of our craftspeople, Alistair Smith, and we were talking about the different skills that we look for and we help develop within our craftspeople, who are our software developers, platform engineers, and so on. And 5 of the disciplines that we talk about are non-technical, and 1 is technical. And even in the non-technical things, we were talking about, like, is it like a tick boxing exercise? Like, do you have to get through each and every one of those things? Or like, and how do we provide our people with the with opportunities to develop those skills? And at the time, my answer to Alistair was that actually it's not a tick box exercise. In fact, those things that we talk about, the kind of skills that you need to learn, they are there as a guide. But the ultimate thing when we look for, when we are promoting our people, when we are reviewing their performance, is around impact. And we think that a lot of the things related to that impact are non-technical, and those things are the guide towards that impact. So my answer to him was that actually promotion, performance, and those kind of things are measured on impact, the impact that you have within your work, and not necessarily whether you have this skill and that skill and this skill, right? So with that in mind, what are your two's thoughts in terms of skills versus impact, and what is important and what supports what in terms of developing your career?
I like that you frame this conversation in this way, because quite often when we talk about non-technical skills, we tend to go to what I call the basic skills of human interaction, right? It's very easy to jump straight to empathy and nonviolent communication and this kind of stuff. That would be the basics for any human interaction, right? And I think that those are the foundation, right? So the basics. This is not just for specific to tech careers and stuff. And I think that the ones that you mentioned, Mash, of focusing on impact, they're not necessarily technical knowledge, is a much better way to frame that, because those are different skills. In order to achieve that, those are different skills. So I have a bunch of them potentially in mind. And by no means I'll just pick one so to avoid me speaking forever. But like, I believe that there is a bunch of skills that will contribute in creating this impact. The one that I'm going to start with is the consultative, I don't even know if that's the proper word, but consultative approach that we talk about consultancy skills. And impact is all about expectation as well, right? So, and the consultative approach is you don't go straight away with a solution to someone, right? So the consultative approach, you try to understand what are the problems that the people around you have, right? So what and that can be a customer, but can be your team as well, can be your product owner, can be a person from a different team that you need to interact. And the consultative approach is you spend a little bit more time in exploring the problem domain. I think that you mentioned that quite a lot, Mesh, like the problem domain in the solution space, or the problem space, solution space. So the consultative approach, like you put a little bit more emphasis in, first of all, let's define the problem. Let's agree. Let's align on the problem that you're trying to solve. And only then, when everyone is on the same page in what the problem is, then you start brainstorming solution. Because at that point, when you are brainstorming the solution, there is already a natural alignment to what you're trying to solve. So then you avoid that thing about being in opposite sides, because you know that whatever, how can I say, proposals for solutions are always with the intent of solving the same problem. So that's one of the things that I would say that is quite an important skill to have.
So I understand your point with going into the basics of human interaction and so on and so forth, and I agree. But if we're talking about impact, the lack of some of those skills creates big impact. It's just negative. You know what I mean? So so you can look at it from the how do I make a positive impact, but also what are some things that definitely
I meant positive impact by definition. Yeah, I'm not talking about
no, I understand
by making lots of negative impacts.
I understand, but it people tend to gravitate towards that because not having those in place definitely has a big negative impact, right? Independently of how good people are, no, in a team, or if you can't communicate, if you can't, have some pretty basic conversations without being at each other's throats, then doesn't work. Yeah. Now, if you ask me for a particular skill that is, I think, I would say in high demand, is I actually have a few, but I would say probably versatility is one, like that attitude and aptitude to put on different hats and adapt to the context and do what is needed in order to get the best results. I think that is a skill in itself, because sometimes you don't have to be the best at what whatever it is the task is, right? Like you don't have to be the best at front end or the Java or whatever, right? Like it's not about being an expert, because most of the work that you need to do, or that it doesn't require that level of expertise. Some of it does, right? But most of it won't. And when you are trying to accomplish a task in a team, a lot of the times you need that fluidity, that ability to basically go where there's a hole and plug it, independently of how well you are able to plug it yourself. Just the fact that you're supporting that, and that creates enough for the team to succeed. And I think that's a great skill to have and to cultivate. And so I see a lot of people who are basically doing the opposite, right? Like they're trying to specialize more and more, or they use it as or they use the specialty as a way to avoid making any taking any responsibilities for owning that outcome as a whole, right? Instead of exactly.
So this is exactly what I was actually meant by when I was saying to Alistair that it's about impact. It's about that result focus. And I was telling him that it's also because I was saying to him that we are talking about careers, right? We're not talking about skills. We're talking about how you build within your career, how do you climb up the ladder, if it's a ladder type thing, like go up the seniority levels and so on. And I was saying to Alistair, like, you have to kind of look at the process itself. And regardless of how many checklists and how many well-defined kind of things that everyone has, ultimately it boils down to a bunch of people sat in a review board and saying this person deserves a promotion, right? And they don't look at those checklists. Those checklists are too much detail. What they think about is their experience of how well they could rely on that person, their experience of how well that person achieved and how impactful or effective that person was, right? And and whether they did a great job, and if they have a good relationship, or if that person, someone else said, oh, that person's really good to kind of certain relationships, right? So there are two things. One is the objective results that you are creating for the business, but even those results for what, results for whom, you're helping someone achieve their goals, right? So you take this responsibility that the goals of the team are, that you will do whatever is needed to achieve those goals, but you're also helping others achieve, like this support aspect as well, but kind of boils down to the impact uh, as well. So it's all about this kind of like, and all these skills are needed underneath it. The versatility, I totally agree, is one of the key aspects, because the problems don't come in these beautiful shapes that really fit your who you are. The real problems that are related, they come in a very jaggedy way. They are very they're not very well defined, and you have to just go there and see what it's about and have that attitude, I guess, to want to solve it, whether you can solve it or you ask for help and support, but take ownership of solving it and taking ownership of creating the results. So the more versatility you have, the better you will see these things, the broader your perspective will be.
Yeah, I like when Jose mentioned the attitude, but he also mentioned with aptitude as well, because we quite often know how to get better at some technical skills, right? So it's much easier to practice a technical skill. We do some katas, we read some technical books, we do some prototypes, or just try to apply in a project, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people sometimes they say, but like, how do I get better at some of those skills that we were discussing, those non-technical skills and stuff? There are, like it took me a long time to understand that we sometimes have more opportunities to practice those things than the actual technical disciplines. So this took me a long time. It sounds funny, but like every single human interaction that you have, if you are aware of it, is an opportunity to practice all of that, right? So not only at work but at home and anywhere else, like every interaction that you have and you are resolving the problems, like, okay, what is the outcome that I want? How do I position my arguments in a specific way? How do I make sure that everyone is on the same boat, that we go in the same direction? So we have those opportunities multiple times a day, right? So in every single interaction. So that awareness also of, so this is for me is a technical skill that you need to develop in order to evolve in your career, is that awareness of your surroundings and practice it. So not become a robot. Of course, you need to be careful that so that your interactions are not very natural, but just being aware, being conscious about what you want to achieve, how you want to conduct certain things. I think that this is a good skill to have as well. So.
It's very, very interesting that you mentioned that, isn't it? It's like, but again, this is in a way, and I know this is kind of, now we're going back to those basic skills, right? Because often, like, where do these positions start from? Yeah. So if you like the positions like this is not my job, right? Or not understanding impact and just saying, okay, I'm here to code, or I'm here to just do this particular part and so on, comes from a very selfish position, right? It's about, I'm hired to do this particular thing. and I will do that thing regardless of who I am hired by and what they're trying to achieve with it, right? I take no responsibility of that. And but this goes back to this idea of putting yourself in place of the stakeholders, the customers, and so on, and trying to understand what they want from you, right? So I'm sorry to say, but I have to now bring in like things like empathy and these kind of skills, is that you need to kind of put yourself in other people's place to see what is required of you, and be able to help them to achieve the ultimate objective for the team and so on. And this, it's not a case of like you're always doing what other people are asking you to do. What you're trying to do is aligning, not thinking from what you need from it, but thinking what does the team need from it, or what does the organization need from you? Because ultimately, you will succeed in your career when you are providing value to your organization. And if you don't understand what that value is, what the expectations from your team and your organization are, then you will never be successful in that.
It's interesting you mentioning this, because I retweeted this morning something from John Cormack. Yeah, it was basically a screenshot of someone who's studying computer science and was asking him, hey, like I want to go into computer science, but with all of this AI talk and blah blah, like will it become irrelevant? Like, what should I do? That, and they were saying, listen, don't worry about that. Yeah. So worry about how do you deliver value. Understand that software is a tool and it's there to do a job or a function. And if you focus on the value that you're delivering, today it may be coding, tomorrow it may be telling the computer what to do, whatever it is. But the format may change, but the end goal is still the same. No.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that in tech, a lot of people miss the mark on. They don't understand the purpose of the thing. They focus on the how I'm doing it, or the internal gratification that they get from the job that they're doing, but not what is it that we are accomplishing, no, together, or what is it that what I'm doing delivers value for, no.
So, but yeah, and Mash, like the thing that you mentioned about the, for example, you gave an example of someone trying to bring a team together, organizing a group of people so that they all move forward and stuff. Of course, that you and then you mentioned empathy and stuff, and this is why I still call them the basics, because like there are the basics for you to have any interactions and have that awareness of your surrounding and how your message goes across and so on. But in there, I treat like empathy as the basics, but what this person is doing is way beyond empathy. Empathy is just the awareness of your surrounding and how do you want that to interact with that surrounding, right? Because you can choose to be aggressive or to be very nice. You can choose, right? So for me, the empathy is that understanding, and then you decide how you're going to treat people or how you're going to feel about how you are treated.
True.
But in that situation,
I think you mean emotional intelligence, not empathy, but
possibly, because for
okay.
me, yeah, emotional intelligence is probably a much wider.
It's a wider thing. Yeah. Okay.
So then, but first, I mean, in that case, for me, I would say that there is a sense of leadership as well. So you use that intelligence to lead, and that doesn't mean that you are positioning yourself as a leader per se, like I am the decision maker here. No, you are becoming an informal leader, right? You are becoming a multiplier. You are helping people to organize, which naturally puts you in a position that everyone trusts, that you are creating value beyond yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone that can coordinate a group of people to achieve something, they provide value beyond their individual value. And we mentioned that in previous Fireside Chats. We talked about leadership. We talked about being a multiplier. I think when we discussed what it means to be a senior professional or something like that, about the multiplier.
The myth of the 10x developer, something like that. I don't remember, something along those lines.
So and I think that those are the things that are important to develop. And there is a thing that in terms of, I don't know if I would call it skills. It's always difficult for me to know what fits in skill or not. But for example, I was thinking about, you need to learn how to be comfortable to be outside of your comfort zone, right? Because like, as if you think about a career, normally we imagine a career as a progression of you always doing more things or having more responsibilities than you have today. Quite often we will think about you can have a career that is different, that has less responsibility. But anyway, but normally how you would think is you are accumulating more responsibilities and so on and so forth. So that means that a career progression, you are always to some degree outside of your comfort zone. Every step that you give, every next step will make you uncomfortable. And you probably need to expose yourself even before to make that step, because if you don't do that before, you might not even have the opportunity to move to the next step. So being out of your comfort zone is the norm when you think about career.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's actually, I mean, in Zen, it's called the beginner's mind, but it's, having, and it is a very difficult thing, especially when you are very good at something, and being to kind of step outside, being really good at your something, to something you're not too sure about, but that's the important thing that needs to be done. I totally agree that having that beginner's mind is very important, and it's whether it's a skill or an attitude, it's something that you need to kind of constantly cultivate. And the more you do it, the more the kind of wider your skill set gets, the easier it gets for you to put yourself in those places as well.
Yeah, I think Kevin said something on our YouTube live chat. He said, like, I always keep in mind that in order to improve, I have to focus on the small day-to-day things. Prepare for the meetings, improve your English, etc. I think that there is something quite important in there, of also control. Kevin, I don't know if I'm going too far from what you wanted to say, but sometimes it's just focusing on your next small challenge instead of creating those. I think we touched upon that last Fireside Chat, actually. Instead of putting goals that are unachievable, right? So you use your immediate environment, your immediate context to improve with small things. There are so many things that we can do to get better that are so easy, that are low-hanging fruits for us to practice, that sometimes we forget about them because we project skills or responsibilities that are way too far from us, right?
Mm-hmm. There is another thing that often we don't put. I think there's a very important thing, is that these small details we don't put a lot of emphasis in, right? This kind of preparation, for a meeting, or when you're going to speak to someone, to have like everything ready, you have a good agenda and so on, so that you know what you're trying to get out of it. These kind of small things, where when you need to, in a way, each one of these interactions that you have with your peers, with your managers, whoever else, that you kind of think about them, like, what am I looking to achieve from that interaction? Of course, there are aspects which are also social aspects, and it's going back to, you're not a robot. But on the other hand, it's if you've gone to a meeting and they're expecting you call that meeting, you're expected to have an agenda, you're expected to drive that meeting, you're expected to make that meeting a good experience for people that you invited in there. So these kind of small things, actions, like sending some actions to everybody, or notes of the meeting to people, say this is what we discussed, this, like these small things that actually improve the experience and improve the people's experience with you, like they interacted with you and it was a pleasant experience. They're going to take that forward, they're going to trust you with things. It's that kind of small things that is, and ultimately it boils down to those relationships, right? Is that like a career is in an organization, and the only time you kind of go up that ladder is when you have a good relationship. Now, it's not just about social, it's about the professional relationship with the rest of that organization. And when you work on that relationship, there's a lot of skills underpinning that. But when you work on that relationship, make that better, you automatically rise up within that organization. Right?
Yeah. There is another thing again, like the theme being non-technical skills for tech careers, right? So we are coming from a perspective that are skills that will help you with have a stable career, a successful career, whatever that successful means to everyone, right? So there is something that I find that is also quite important. It's and I don't claim to have the right balance here in any of those things that I'm mentioning, but but choosing your own battles is another kind of skill that I find very, very important. Like most of us will think that we can contribute in a lot of areas. We might have strong opinions in many areas. And sometimes we try to fight those battles in each one of those areas with the same intensity, as if they all had the same degree of importance or priority and stuff. And this took me a long time again to understand, because like I was if I'm difficult to work with today, imagine, well, Mash, you met me. You know how it was very well, how it was at the beginning. I would fight every battle with a lot of intensity, right? So and that was detrimental to me in multiple ways, and not only to me but to people around me. Detrimental to me because you become stressed all the time, right? So you are always unhappy and always arguing and stuff. But also is detrimental to the other people around you as well. And then I also noticed that, for example, sometimes you need to give something in order to have something else. For example, when you are pair programming with someone, right? So if you fight for every single semicolon, like first of all, it will be a pain to work with, and you will be making that relationship difficult and miss important decisions, because like you are fighting, like arguing with the same intensity with semicolons or where the curly bracket goes. And you will do exactly the same for major architectural decisions. So this is what took me a long time to understand. Sometimes you say like, okay, in a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I care about those things? So what are the things that I would like to resolve? How much do I care about each one of them? And where do I want to use my credits? Right? So if I want some people to work with me so that we agree a way forward, I need to make sure that I focus my effort in certain areas, and I even like to the point that I can even let go of other things. Say, you know what, in this area here, you are I'm happy to go with your suggestion and stuff, even if I probably would do that differently. But because as you favor someone else's opinion in certain areas, you almost like gain credits, So when the next thing comes up, those people will be a bit more open to accept your suggestions, because they know that you accept their suggestions very often. So this thing about choosing your battles and understanding that dynamic for me is quite essential, actually, in your career.
But you're taking it in the context of influencing other people as well and so on. But I think there is also an aspect of focusing your energy into what matters, basically, or what where you can get the most impact. Even I think that's also there.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're constantly fighting every battle that you find, that energy gets diluted. There is no way that you're going to be able to sustain that. No.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Actually, funny you say that, because this is exactly what I had written down as well, Jose. Is I don't know where I read it, whether it was Christopher Alexander or Richard Sennett. And when they were talking about skills, I think it was Richard Sennett in The Craftsman, the book, right? and he talks about problem selection versus problem solving. And it's actually more of a skill to select the right problem than to actually solve that problem. Then is that, if you choose the wrong problem, you're not going to have that. Again, it's back to that impact as well, right? And we were talking, and this connects to the having that like emotional intelligence or empathy and so on, to understanding lots of different viewpoints, understanding lots of areas where you can focus your effort, but selecting the right kind of things to focus your effort is a great skill to have. And in that he talks about, like, problem selection is a skill. Understanding how certain kind of what problem to solve and what to ignore is the skill even before you start understanding how to solve them.
And you touch on something else, because there's context to understand what the problem is and so on. I think someone in the chat, I think it was Mohammed Sufyan, no, it was saying understanding mental models from the fifth discipline is something that is helpful, etc. I think actually systemic thinking is, I mean, the understanding mental models is good, but systemic thinking for me is it's a big thing, right? Like if you understand the relationships between things, no, the patterns or anti patterns that you can find and so on, you can then start recognizing them and really understand the dynamics and act on them, right? And not treat the symptom when you could be treating the root cause and dealing with the problem head on, no, and things like that. And I feel like that's also a skill, right? Understanding that causality may not be linear, right? Like that things are connected, then they affect each other. It's not like, oh, this is this happens because and this happens because this happens as well. No, it's like all of that is related, interrelated, and it helps you think differently. When you're tackling certain problems, no, you still need to attack things in a linear way, because you do this and then you do this, no, but you can understand where to focus, right, and definitely make better decisions that way.
Yeah, so this is like, I remember that there was a time like a few years ago that I heard a lot of people talking about system thinking, and I didn't know exactly what it. Well, by the name you try to imagine, but I didn't know much, and then I end up, so okay, I'm gonna read a little bit into it, and it was really fascinating. It really opens your mind, and mainly for people that are in leadership positions or aspiring to be in leadership positions. Systems thinking is a thing that is worth reading a couple of books into it, try to understand a little bit more, and I think that is a I agree with you, Jose, is a
and
very, very
applying to when you're thinking, basically try to map out the problem that you have, because this is the thing, like organizations are complex systems. They're full of people. That just means full of things that can go whichever way, right? Like it's not there's not a linear causality aspect to it. No, it's lots of things are happening at the same time. They're affecting each other. Some of them you don't even know that they have a relation, etc., right? So it definitely helps you manage that complexity, that leading an organization is, right?
yeah.
Because a lot of the times, the further you advance in your career, the more difficult the problems become, because the easy problems, they're already being solved by other people, right? So what gets on your table is just the stuff that doesn't have a right answer. You know what I mean? So then it's about making trade-offs, then it's about having the better information to make decisions, no, and being able to analyze that information in a way that it makes sense.
And it helps with the impact that you were saying, Mesh, as well, right? So because once you understand, you have a more systemic view of the problem, you try to you don't get too, you don't go too quickly in simplifying the problem too much, so you try to explore the problem space a little bit more, see everything, So when you build that more systemic view, it's much easier for you to understand what you can do to have a bigger impact, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Where to kind of put the pressure on to kind of relieve the rest, right? And even like sometimes, and when to kind of deal with things at once. So, as you were saying, like sometimes, you look at one thing and yes, that is a problem. But, if you deal with that, then something else may be. But so knowing that, this is going to cause that to happen and this is going to cause that to happen. The I think even in going a bit more abstract, it's about learning how to think as well. I mean, I know like getting to a particular age, it kind of you start getting a bit philosophical and so on. But sometimes I wish that I had that kind of critical thinking mind when I was younger, that, I wasn't just kind of rushing into the next thing and this, the next shiny and all those kind of things, and having very shallow view of everything, that thinking a bit deeper in all these things. And I'm sure it's not something you just gain with age. I'm sure it's something that you can gain with, understanding, like things like critical thinking, things like, as you said, systems thinking, uh, how you process information, dealing with people and understanding different kind of people and people's motivation, like things like those basic things like empathy and so. I didn't even know what empathy meant, at a, at a certain age, right? So these things are, and how to have a discussion, how to have a debate, how to kind of, as you're getting emotional or you kind of feeling like, you're just kind of getting carried away with the events, how do you kind of try to step back and kind of deal with things in a professional way? I mean, these are the things that you can work on at a very early age, and if you do, then you get to a very, you get to a good level very quickly, I think.
It's still a challenge for me at my age.
Same here.
It's like so shit. Like, okay, let me tone down a bit, but like, yeah. So it's not ingrained yet.
No, it never. Sometimes it never. Now, these things are very easy to say. Sometimes when you get carried away, it's not easy to do. Right.
No,
This
no,
is
but that's part of emotional intelligence. Now, the self control of self regulating, no, it is a skill as well.
Yeah,
It is.
because you need to
It can be.
practice to
It
get
can be. It can
become
be
good at it.
trained, and yeah, no, it can be trained because the way that works is, you, let's say something happens and you react. No, I don't know. Something didn't go the way. I get angry. I explode. I whatever. Right, and then you reflect, and you figure, oh, maybe I shouldn't have acted like that. Whatever. Right, and the best. This is how you train this, by the way. Like, you then figure out what are the triggers and what are the pre the how do you call this, like when there's an earthquake or something, like the thing that happens before the event, or pre precludes, well, the
That comes
yeah
before.
exactly, no, the thing that kind of signals, no, that it's happening, right? So you look at the triggers, so you look at what kind of triggers that situation. Now you reflect on what happened, and then how do you feel, or how do you notice it? Do I start raising my voice? Do I get up and get tense? Whatever, right? And then the next time that it happens, you pay attention to those cues, and little by little, no, it may happen again, and you explore again. But now it's not days before you realize that you didn't do that right, right? It starts moving backwards, right?
Yeah.
Until you get to the point where, when it's happening, you're already able to notice that those things are happening, and you kind of short circuit that reaction, right? But it takes practice, and it takes reflection, and it takes a lot of work as well.
So there is a thing on the chat, on the live chat. So if you are listening to us on YouTube, so or any other channel, the YouTube live chat is where you can interact with us. Sebastian Guevara, I think that's how you pronounce, mentioned something cool.
Guevara, like Che Guevara.
Like, yeah. So he said, like, another one that I find very important is to know at what level you are speaking, so that the audience understands what you mean. This is really, really important. There is no doubt at all for your career. As you are evolving your career, you will inevitably interact with many people that have a different background to you. Like if you're a developer, for example, you will be interacting with a wide variety of different people that have different skills and different knowledge and so on and so forth. So the developers, more specifically, like I noticed multiple times that cannot really calibrate. They want to talk about low level technical problems to people in business, for example, and then they get frustrated that the other person didn't understand what they were saying or didn't sponsor whatever they wanted to do or something like that. And this is quite often, like Sebastian was saying, it's not that the developer didn't have good intentions or they were not trying to solve a serious problem. They just failed in how to communicate that, to pitch the thing at the level that had to be pitched. So this is quite an important thing.
I find this in demos a lot, where there's a bunch of stakeholders like giving up valuable time out of their business, and then they sat there and the developer is going through lines of code. It's like, oh, I added this and we did this, and it's like not a lot of empathy with what that person cares for, and this, like, we always talk about the demos and talk about, like, understand your audience, who's attending the demo and what will they be interested in. Everything else is just vanity. You're just trying to show that you've done some work, and in fact what that creates is not a positive, it creates a negative impact, because they then see that nothing lines up to what they care about, so nothing is being done. So it's not that you can show them reams and reams of code, they don't care, they'll just still think that nothing is being done. And this is kind of an extension of like understanding who you are talking to. And often when we especially from a more technical background, we talk about tech careers, we become very too focused on the details of our work, and not what that's a mean, and what is the end, what is the value, and how to articulate value of what we are doing.
And there is just before we started recording, Jose and I, we were talking just before you joined, Mesh. We were talking about a situation where people being burned out, and of course that this is a real thing. That this is not what I'm questioning. That's not what I want to discuss. It's more like certain professions or certain careers you need, and I mentioned that in our previous episode about building that mental strength, right? So, and the mental strength is like some people would call in the lame terms like thick skin, right? So, but for certain positions, as you progress in your career, you will accumulate more and more responsibilities. You will probably be managing people and stuff. So your job becomes managing situations, dealing with pressure. That is your job.
Managing problems. You're a problem magnet, basically. Like problems find you and they stick to you. It's
precisely. So for example, you can be an engineering manager, a team lead, a project manager, or even like a coach or a C-level person, or any of those roles. Your job is to solve problems. So if you put yourself into those positions and you are being like you are suffering from burnout, you need to reconsider if you have the right mental strength to perform that role, because that role is pressure. By nature is to solve problems. So you need as a skill to understand that, to build that mental strength. And I was saying, like, be able to be comfortable, to be uncomfortable. But you are the one that needs to have the mental strength to create a safe environment for everyone. You cannot be the one that needs a safe environment to operate, right? So also, when you talk about skills in careers and stuff, you also need to be honest to yourself and say, your career has multiple possibilities. No career is linear. Like, you are in total control to completely change what you want to do in the future, right? A career doesn't mean that you need to progress upwards, have more responsibility, bigger salary and stuff. Your career is just the accumulation of things that you do over time. Yeah. So you need to be honest to yourself and decide, like, what kind of work do I want to do, and am I suitable, or this kind of work, is it suitable to me, and vice versa, right? But if you want to have management positions or leadership positions, you need to be able to cope with stress. You cannot just say, I'm burned out, because if you are burned out in a management position, that kind of position is not for you. That's as simple as that.
Someone was talking about this. It's actually an old university friend of mine. Was talking about, he's had some kind of burnt the midnight oil in many ways, and he was talking. He's a CEO of a big organization, and he was like, I've kind of found out quite late in life that before I am CEO of a big organization, I need to be CEO of myself. Right. So I need to be able to, because he was more talking about, like, he was actually talking about like health, mental and physical health. And in order for us to do a job well, we need to be able to make sure that we look after ourselves, that we create the right environment for ourselves. Part of that is to do with selection, as you said. Sometimes certain kind of roles or certain kind of position, we just, it's not the kind of thing that is for you, at least for where you are in that particular time and so on. But the actual main thing is that you need to see how you are creating the right environment around yourself, right? So burnout is often, there are aspects which are related to external pressures, right? So you are working in a particular organization that is really kind of, especially like there's a startup mentality and so on, that there's unsustainable pace. But even then you have a choice, right? More often than not, right? Is that, at what point you kind of think, well, hang on, hold back. But often, and, of course, you can always get to a point where, you don't have a lot of options. But there are more options than you think. You can always ask for help. You can always articulate that this is kind of burning you out and those kind of things. But you can also see how you can change your ways of working, change your own relationship with your work so that you don't burn out. But the other aspect is that designing your work, sometimes we are our own worst enemies, right? It's like, I think someone was talking about, like thinking that you're always in front of your screen. Sometimes we do get obsessed with what we are doing, right? And we kind of put ourselves into more and more pressure. And being able to deal with that, I think, is also important. So it's like, taking that responsibility that I'm going to create the right environment for myself, for my mental and physical well-being. And then from there on, work outwards to see how do I create the right environment for my organization, for my team. What do I contribute? And, at what level do I need to contribute? And certain situation may not be suitable for where you are in your life. But taking responsibility to kind of shaping the environment around you is an important aspect of leading, and you lead yourself first and then others, I guess.
Yeah. So when you're So there is something else from Sebastian. Let me read. When you are in a leadership position, another one is to protect the team from things that are not necessary from outside and can affect their progress. This probably can. This is certainly part of being someone in a leadership position. There is no doubt. That is. Yes, it is part of. If you want to lead people, you need to make sure that you can lead them efficiently, and they need to be in a healthy state so that they can perform, be happy to be there, and achieve things and stuff. And then that's is a different way to put what we were saying about being a multiplier, right? So you being able to enable other people to work well, and that is for me a skill that you have as you are progressing with your career, right? So
So
Yeah.
moving on to something else, or do you want to add something, Mash, to that?
No, no, we
No,
can move on to something else. But
because you mentioned asking for help. No, as one of the options. There's other options. I think asking for help is in itself a skill. How you ask for help and when you ask for help and all that's in itself. Because some people are like constantly asking for help. That's not a good way to go about it, right? Um, but at the same time, the opposite is, no, it's like I spent 5 days. I didn't want to bother you. I didn't, that kind of thing.
and
That's
now
also,
everything is
and
crashing
now
and
we're five
burning.
days delayed. No, because we didn't have a conversation, a 15-minute conversation, right? So, so that's also, I think, a skill. No, that balance between, okay, so I need to ask for help versus I'll do it on my own. No, and I need to try it and figure out what the thing is. Of course, some things there's no one you can ask help to, right? Like there are certain problems that nobody, I mean, they can support you for sure, right? Like they can tell you what they think that should be done, etc. But there's certain problems you don't get an answer for, right? They're not stack overflowables. You know what I mean? It's not as simple as that, right? So yeah,
it's
that's
it's actually a very important point. Like asking, because you need to be, like the most trivial example is that I would get a message on Slack, and it's two paragraphs, and what they're asking from me is not even clear. So the first thing is that I look at the two paragraphs, I won't even read them, and I'll say, okay, mark it as unread, and I'll read it at another point when I have the time. So that's one thing, right? So then that's already delayed because that person, but I'm doing something as well, right? So that person is, and I know that they're now delayed. Maybe they need, but it's not even clear that this thing is stopping them because I haven't read it. It's two like two paragraphs, and then even in them two paragraphs, like they're describing and going through the thing, but not describing what they need from me. And sometimes it's just a simple response, like a question, maybe with a concept, but or just even a question, and wait for me to see if I already have the context, right? And but that's a very trivial example, right? But I think it goes all the way up
it's
to big
it,
things.
it's very trivial, but lots of people get it wrong. Another example is like, you are working with people who may be very busy. They have 10 other things that they need to take care of. Yeah. And the typical example is, hey, on Slack. Okay. Now, you remember that thing we talk about? It's done. No, or you remember, no, like that kind of thing where, okay, what thing? What is the, like, is it done? Did it, you know what I mean? Like, what? Why are you telling me? You know what I mean? Like all those things, like giving people context before you actually. I do believe like you need to manage up as well, right?
Yeah,
That's a good
it's almost
skill to have.
it's almost up there, as in like, oh, can we have a quick catch up? It's like
Exactly.
Of course, I have nothing
Can
better
we
to do right
can we
now. Of
make it a
course.
line? No, can we
Yeah.
make it a line? Let's catch up. Let's just write what you need to.
yeah,
Right? No, but but you need to you that's a skill as well, right? Like managing up and like, hey, listen, this is the context. Enough context for you to, because again, you're coming from doing something else. You're switching content. Like, hey, listen, last time we spoke, I asked, what we should do about this, and I said I was going to look into it. Here's what I found. I think this is the best alternative. What do you think? Or
yeah.
I think this is I'm going to execute unless you have an issue with it.
Oh,
Or you
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, but
yeah,
that's it's
Exactly.
like
I
here's
have
the
this
intention, right?
situation
Here's the
here.
context for you to
Yeah,
understand what I
exactly.
want to do. Here's what I need from you, or here's what I'm planning on doing. Do you have
Exactly. Can we have a
anything to
conversation
add?
about that? Right?
That's it,
you know,
right?
the speaking of these things, I was actually speaking to someone earlier today, and I said to I like I often say to people that if I said couple of things. If I asked you how this thing is going, that's you're on the back foot because I shouldn't have had to ask, right? Even worse, if I say that I need more visibility, I'm not happy with what you've done so far, right? So like expectations are not aligned or the output is not there. But the important thing in here is that often we need to anticipate these implicit expectations. I was speaking to Rachel today, and like, we need to, like, sometimes I feel like I'm pestering my team a bit because, uh, we said that we'll do something, that we fix something. I think in my head that the customer was expecting this to be done maybe in a day, because that, like, it wasn't explicit, but I'm thinking, right? But now it's been 2 days. Now I'm thinking, am I going to pester my team? Because I'm thinking in my head that when that sponsor spoke to us, that when we said, oh, we'll look at it, they're expecting that the next day we'll come back with something, and we haven't come back to them. But this is a skill, like this implicit expectation, understanding implicit expectations, and if you think that the expectations are not right, making them explicit, to say like, okay,
Yeah,
you may be
checking,
thinking I'll
checking.
come back to you tomorrow, but it won't. I think this is going to take 2-3 days. Make it so that, but as soon as there is, expectations are going to be there regardless. Whether you give an estimate or not, there's going to be an expectation. And making sure that you understand that, whether implicitly or explicitly, is your responsibility. And if your sponsor comes back to you, the first time they might ask, you've already gone past their expectation. That's why they came to ask. And if they keep having to do that, it's going to create this feeling or sentiment that, you're not doing the job as well as expected.
Basically, my sentiments, I'm having to micromanage you, kind of. No,
Yes,
it's like
exactly.
I am having to actively keep you in the back of my head, so that like I need to ask, I need to ask, I
Yeah,
need to ask, and that's definitely not helping me out.
yeah,
That is true.
And
Yeah,
this is why, like, before we were discussing about that, is clarifying expectations right at the beginning of this episode. It's like that ability, the consultative approach is making sure that you understand what is expected, what we are trying to solve, and discussing that the cadence of feedback would be part of that, right? So as you are in a long term thing, and as you guys were talking, I could pick three topics in things that you mentioned. Uh, One was the asking for help. Very quickly, just want to quickly go back to the asking for help. In the previous episode, we discussed about having confidence and that dynamic. For example, if I ask for help, I might not pass confidence, but if I try to resolve everything myself, then things go wrong. And then and we were saying in the previous episode as well, you can ask for help still with a lot of confidence without like anyone thinking that you are not capable of doing things. And one way of doing that is to say, hey, I need your help. I have this situation here. I've tried X, Y, and Z, but I still was not able to resolve this, or I'm a bit uncertain which way to go, and I would love your opinion on that. So this way you are saying, hey, I took on that responsibility. I tried to resolve myself, but I would like a second pair of eyes. I would like your opinion before I go forward, or I'm stuck. But I tried, I reached my limit, and balance that, and understanding like when as you said, Jose, you cannot go like in the one day before the deadline and say, oh, now I'm gonna ask for help, when you should have asked for help like a month ago, right? So calibration that is important as well. So that was one thing, but you can ask for help and still show that you are capable, that you are trying and stuff, but you cannot just go and ask for help for everything, but you need to be able to give context and what you've done. There is another thing that, as you were discussing, I was thinking was the ability or the skills to always make a decision and not be stuck, right? So mainly as you are moving to leadership roles, and like you need to be making decisions, right? So sometimes the cost of not making a decision is higher than making the wrong decision, because at least with the wrong decision you learned something. But if you don't make a decision, you are stuck, right? There's no information that comes up and you are stuck. Things are not progressing. They are blocked by the lack of action, right? And sometimes, like, if you are comfortable that you can handle the side effects of those decisions, make the decision. If you are uncomfortable, ask for help, ask for advice, and so on and so forth, but make a decision. So you need to be decisive. I think that's probably a thing that will help in your career, right? Just understand the spheres of autonomy that you have. And the last thing that I would like to say, as you were discussing as well, is being able to understand the difference between the important and urgent, right? So I had a situation that's similar to some of the things that you mentioned today, where I was having a conversation with one of our guys, and we had a situation where we had a meeting with a potential client. The potential client was waiting for something to be sent, but we were not very clear exactly what had to be sent. And he's a person that we have, this client is someone that we have enough intimacy as well. But like, we were trying to come up with something perfect, and that was taking a little bit longer than we expected. And I said, look, don't try to, so instead of like, this is important that we create something nice and well polished and stuff, but it's more important just to give an answer. So it's better just to go back and clarify exactly what they want, instead of taking a longer time. Try to create something strategic and then offer something after a long delay, something that is not fit for purpose. So it was easier for us to say, look, what is urgent in here is like, check exactly what they want and what kind of information that they need to make a decision. Instead of us trying to, so this is important, let's try to do a lot of work but not address the urgent. But then there is the opposite as well. If we're always addressing the urgent, you never do strategic things. So I think that what I was trying to illustrate, like, you need to find a way to balance what is urgent and spend as little time as possible to solve the urgent, so you have more time to spend in what is important and strategic, right? So I think that skill, that balance, is for me also quite important.
In that example, there is also another aspect around interactions, right? Is that people, small, quicker interactions are favored over one thing that I'm just going to throw over the fence to you, right? This is always, it's a good principle to keep when you're dealing with people, is that, if you're doing something, even if you're not, like, often I say to people, like, in this case, it's a case of like, we need to get back to the person. Sometimes it's just a case of like, okay, I thought, you may be expecting for me to get back to you today. Still working on this. It's taking a bit longer than think, or even when the expectations are like, say someone said, oh, get back to us, said, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. The next week towards the same time you say, oh, by the way, just to let you know, working on it is progressing well. That kind of just keeping that heartbeat, in communication is actually very important. It stops the person from kind of wondering what's happening, even when they're expecting something kind of later on. They're not expecting now, but it actually helps with the conversation, helps with the relationship. You're keeping it warm. And this is a very important aspect that we often forget.
Yeah, this balance is important, because you cannot be strategic. You cannot make a lot of very important decisions or strategic decisions if you are under pressure, when things are on fire. So either on pressure, like in this case it was not on fire, it's just like making sure that you get back to someone and offer a good service. If someone is expecting something, you better speak to that person, make sure that they get what they need, or at least you speak to them instead of making them not responding at all, right? So but I think that this decision, mainly when you are progressing with your careers, you will encounter a lot of things that are urgent, but you need to make sure that what is urgent resolve them with the simplest and fastest solution as possible, so that the pressure goes away, and then you create time to do things that are important in a more strategic fashion. But you cannot make strategic decisions when the house is on fire, basically.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we're reaching that time. Any final thoughts?
So, well, I think that it's important to. I think that in this episode, what I liked about this episode is that we focused on skills that are for the career, and there was a distinction between basic people skills that you need for not only your career, you need for any human interactions, and that you need to do well. You need to understand them, be able to communicate well, interact with people well, and so on and so forth. But that alone is extremely important for social interactions, but that alone is not enough for you to simply help with your career. This episode, I think that we talked about a lot of things that were more concrete in terms of things that you can do, in terms of attitude, in terms of skills, things that you need to worry about with your career in order to move forward, let's say. So.
And you, Jose?
Then
Do you want to introduce a new topic?
No, it's just in general. I would stick with, there are many opportunities to be able to practice these things. You don't have to wait until you want to get a promotion, or you want to be able to do this. The better you get at doing this basically all the time, the more successful you'll be. And things like good communication, handling expectations, etc., like those are everyday things that you need to deal with. So the last thing, I guess, is I related to the point on resilience, or how did you call it, mental
Strength,
and so on. Again, there is an aspect of the job is what the job is, you know what I mean? Like, you will be having to deal with it. So it's build the skills to handle pressure well. And because you cannot change the pressure that you're gonna get. No, like, that's gonna have, like, problems are gonna happen, and you're gonna have to deal with them because it's the job. But you can control how much that bothers you, or how much that how you react, or how it affects you. And I think that's a great skill to have for work, and for life, and for everything, right? So yeah, just practice it.
I think I totally agree with what both of you said. Also, there is, like, you should take the tech career, kind of like technical career, and I'm talking about career in terms of like stepping up that ladder, getting more responsibility, moving into positions that you aspire to. I see it off as the people that will decide that your next promotion understand what their goals and what their needs are, and then help them achieve it. And help your peers, because they will be your reference. And then you will move up in your career. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for listening. As usual, if you like this episode and you want to hear more, like, subscribe, and we'll be back next Tuesday. And thank you for the people who are involved in the live conversation as well. As always, it adds a lot to our conversation, so thank you very much. And good night.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.